This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. Lawmakers in both Missouri and Illinois are embracing an idea to make it easier for people to have their old criminal records expunged. It's a way to help people who committed nonviolent crimes in the past because, even decades later, those records can become obstacles to jobs and housing. The new system makes the process easier by making it automatic. In Illinois, the Clean Slate Act was signed into law in January, affecting an estimated 2 million residents. Meanwhile, Missouri also has a Clean Slate Act, but it's not a law yet. It is currently a bill moving through the legislative process. Its sponsors and advocates have spent the last 4 years in Jefferson City trying to make the promise of an automatic expungement a reality in Missouri. And joining me now to talk about Missouri's Clean Slate Act and to learn about why this campaign is so important to people in multiple states, I'm joined by Mallory Rusch. She's the executive director of Empower Missouri and one of the leaders of the Missouri Clean Slate campaign. Mallory, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
And also with us is Patty Berger. She is the president of the St. Louis chapter of All of Us or None. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk about the legislative journey a little bit more in just a few moments. But first, I want to understand the current system. Mallory, the way that expungements work now is that for certain crimes, a person can apply to have their criminal records wiped. Now, what is the problem with the way that that system operates now?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the biggest problem is that it's not working as it was intended to work. And the reason that we know that is that less than 1% of people who are eligible for these expungements are actually receiving them on an annual basis. And that's because the process is very complicated and it's very expensive. So what we have heard over the years is that it's basically impossible to achieve without hiring a lawyer. And the individuals who need these expungements are often not individuals who can afford a lawyer. We've heard from legal aid clinics across the state that they get inundated with these type of requests, and they're often not able to help because of their already enormously large caseloads. And so we know that, if we've already said these folks are eligible for a second chance and a fresh start, why are we making them jump through a bunch of administrative hoops to be able to get that?
Mm-hmm. So the intention there is for fresh start.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, not all crimes are eligible for expungement. This generally covers non-violent crimes, including some felonies. Does the Clean Slate Act change that eligibility?
It does not. So something that is true in both Illinois and Missouri is that it's maintaining the exact same eligibility that exists for expungements under Missouri law. It's just saying if we've already decided that this is an offense that qualifies for an expungement, you should receive that automatically once you have met a list of additional qualifications in order to receive that expungement.
Mm-hmm. What are some of those qualifications?
So primarily it's a waiting period. So in Missouri, you have to wait for a year to get a misdemeanor expunged from your record and 3 years for a felony. And during that time, you cannot have committed any other violations. So basically you have to sort of prove once you're out of prison and back in the community that you are committed to being a law-abiding citizen by not committing additional offenses. The only additional thing is that if you do owe restitution to someone for a crime, you do have to pay that restitution before you're eligible to have your record expunged.
Mm-hmm. Now, Patty, All of Us or None is a nonprofit that advocates for formerly incarcerated people and their families. What are you hearing from your members about the expungement process as it exists now, and especially around how it needs improvements?
Yes, most of our members are formerly incarcerated people or families of incarcerated or formerly incarcerated people. We have found that even though people are eligible and they may have the crimes that are on the list, they still may not fit the criteria. I'm one of those people. Mm-hmm. I have been out of the system for 25 years. Don't have parole, no probation, haven't been rearrested or anything, but the number of felonies that I have and I've been convicted or pled guilty to is 18. So I'm not eligible for that. Also, it seems that people who don't even know that they can get an expungement, and like Mallory just said, they're not aware of how the laws work, and when they do try, they get overwhelmed and stop before they even start. So a lot of the women and men that are incarcerated right now, expungement would definitely be a deterrent for getting in trouble in prison, knowing that while you're there, you're doing your time. When you get out after so long, you can have your record cleared. And I am hoping, though, that maybe if Clean Slate gets through the legislative process this year, there is a clause in there that if age 65 or older, you can have your record expunged. So I hope that can work for me. But even if it doesn't, I've been doing this work long enough, and I know that it would mean the world to families and people that are affected by it.
Mallory, I want to clarify one thing. We've referenced the Clean Slate Act as being automatic, but that doesn't mean instant, right? So if we're being technical about our language, we're actually talking about an automated system. So what does that mean, in real life terms?
Yeah, so it's implementing technology. We are living in an age where technology can do incredible things, right? And so Missouri and Illinois are not the first places to pursue Clean Slate. It has been passed in 12 other states and the District of Columbia. And so we know there are several states, including Michigan and Pennsylvania, that have already fully implemented the algorithm that's used to comb their criminal history database and identify cases that are eligible for record sealing. So that's what we're want to put in place here in Missouri. It would be a quarterly process where once a quarter, an algorithm combs the database, finds the cases that have become newly eligible in the last 90 days, and then begins to route those cases through a process for expungement. So really, it just means this is a process that does not need human intervention. There is no one in the court staff or law enforcement that's having to manually review these cases, and there's no action that's required on the part of the person who holds the record that's being expunged.
Patty, how would this change, taking the human role out of the process? How would the automated process make things easier on your members?
It would make it a lot easier. They wouldn't have to worry about when they hit the 3-year mark or the year mark, it's just going to fall off. And it's sealed, it's there for law enforcement purposes. But as far as renting or finding a job, it makes a difference. I work for the city of St. Louis. They do hire formerly incarcerated people. My job is deputy public administrator for the city of St. Louis. My boss is the public administrator, and he oversees people who need guardians, people who are mentally ill or physically not able to take care of themselves, don't have family or anyone that can do it, and our office gets appointed to oversee their care. And so this would open doors for so many people to have employment. I got lucky. The day that I did my interview in December of 2016, the public administrator at that time interviewed me, and I told him about my criminal record. I had just graduated from college with my degree in social work, and he said, I don't know if I can hire you. I have to check. He did, and he hired me, and it's been almost 10 years. I had to network with a lot of people to get the job and be accepted into the role because I had worked really hard to get to that point. Everybody doesn't have the opportunity that I was given. Some people, and early on when I got out, I worked at Motel 6, cleaning rooms. I had one crappy job after the other. But, it gave me a work history and it opened doors for me, and I'm very fortunate and I'm blessed and I know it. And that's why I do the work that I do with All of Us or None. We're a national organization. We have chapters in about 30 cities. And St. Louis chapter started in 2018. So we've done a lot of work here in Missouri, changing legislation. And I just think that it's given our membership value, that their voices matter. We believe nothing about us without us.
Mm-hmm. We need to take a quick break. We'll be back shortly to continue this conversation with Patty Berger, president of the St. Louis chapter of All of Us or None, and Mallory Rusch, executive director of Empower Missouri. Stay tuned. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio. Welcome back. Let's return to our conversation about a Missouri proposal called the Clean Slate Act, a bill that, if passed, would automatically clear thousands of Missourians' records of nonviolent crimes. I'm here with Mallory Rusch. She's the executive director of Empower Missouri, and Patty Berger, president of the St. Louis chapter of All of Us or None. Before the break, Mallory, you were talking about some of the other states that have passed similar versions of this Clean Slate Act. How is it that this campaign came to Missouri?
Yeah, we started working on this over 5 years ago. We heard that there was this movement happening in other states, and we're always looking at positive reforms for the criminal justice system in Missouri that are likely to help the largest number of people. And so what we knew at that point is that we were seeing so many folks who are reentering the community after these prison sentences and just really struggling. There are so few folks who are willing to hire individuals who have a past criminal record, and so many individuals who don't want to rent to individuals with a past criminal record. And so if you think about it, two of the most foundational things that any person needs is the ability to provide for themselves and a safe place to put a roof over their head at the end of the day. And what we were seeing is that folks reentering society weren't being able to get either of those things, largely due to this huge proliferation of background checks that have happened over the last 20 years or so as the internet has become a household norm. And so what we talk about a lot is that what was happening in the system, the way these folks were being punished for the rest of their lives because of these criminal records was never the way that our criminal justice system was actually designed to work. And so we saw this as a real opportunity to intervene and course correct back to the way that the system was supposed to be designed, which was that you have a punishment that is commensurate with the level of harm that your crime has done, not that you punish people for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Now, last week, the Clean Slate Act passed the Missouri House of Representatives, so it's not a law yet. But thus far, this is the farthest that it has gotten on the pathway to becoming one. What changed this year, Mallory?
It was so exciting. It passed the House. I have to brag on this because it passed with a 140-7 vote margin. So it didn't just pass, it passed with overwhelming support. And that's something we're so proud of, because I think when we started talking about this legislation 4 years ago, legislators were a little wary of, is this something we need to do? We already have a process in place. Can't people just use the petition-based system? And through a lot of advocacy and through bringing wonderful groups like All of Us or None and other groups that serve personally impacted individuals to the Capitol to tell their stories, we've really been able to chip away at that to the point where this year, when we're sitting in hearings, everyone is like, yep, this is a thing that we need to do. It's important. It's necessary for the economy in Missouri. It's necessary to take the burden off social service organizations in Missouri. And so we no longer have really any sort of opposition to the idea of clean slate. The only thing that lingers is concerns about the technical implementation of the policy here. And so, Missouri's systems are a little antiquated. They tend to be a little behind the rest of the country. And so I think the conversations that are happening now is how can we be sure that the systems will work? I know that our organization and many other organizations working with us strongly believe that it is possible to implement this technology. We're just doing a little more convincing of of some of the folks with a little bit more of the Luddite-ish tendencies among us.
Now, I mentioned earlier that Illinois has already passed its own version of the Clean Slate Act, and in doing so, it became the 13th state to implement such a policy and was signed into law in January, and it will go into effect starting in 2029. Artinese Myrik is the deputy director of Live Free Illinois, and in an interview last week, she talked about how the Illinois version of the Clean Slate Act spent years trying and failing to become law.
I think a lot of it was very much some legislators being fatigued about criminal justice reform bills. We passed a historic bill in Illinois called the Safety Act, and so a little bit after that, some lawmakers were a little bit weary of that. But I think that attests to the good organizing that happened from the Clean Slate Illinois Coalition. We didn't just workshop this bill as a criminal justice reform bill. We talked about it as a workforce development bill. We talked about it as an economic development bill that would bring over $4.7 billion to Illinois' economic arena. And so we were able to, I think, surpass those hurdles to make sure that we can get the bill workshopped.
Patty, what comes to mind for you hearing that?
What comes to mind more than anything is sometimes just changing a few words makes it acceptable for our lawmakers. And I've been doing this about 25 years now, and I have learned that we all can work together. It's sometime in the presentation, and I've learned to speak and do things a little bit differently. I used to have a little bit of a radical side. I felt like it was a moral thing. You should understand, why can't you understand we need jobs and our families need parents? And I've come to know that other people's concerns matter too. And I listen to them, and I try to find a way that we can both get along and do it together. I've been working with part of the coalition, the Community Justice Coalition with Empower Missouri. All of us are known as been a member of that for years. So, it works when you do it together.
Mm-hmm. Mallory, what are you looking for as the Clean Slate Act moves to the Missouri Senate?
Yeah, well, we've actually already had an initial hearing in the Senate on the Senate-filed versions of the bills. This is a bipartisan effort in both chambers. So there were 4 different bills filed this year, one from a Democrat and one from a Republican in each of the chambers. And so the Senate has already begun the conversation, which is great. I think that the initial hearing went very well. And so now I think that, in the legislature is preparing to go out on spring break. They're off next week. And so once they come back, then we're kind of off to the races, right? It's the final 8 weeks. And I think truly the largest battle will be demonstrating that Clean Slate should rise to the top of the list of all the bills that they're considering to ensure that this is something that actually gets done this year.
And Patty, what's your hope for what the Clean Slate Act could do for members of your group?
Clean Slate can open doors for our membership. It can open doors for people who aren't part of our membership. I think there's 500,000 people who would be eligible for having their records, expunged if we can get it done here in Missouri. So I look at it as a big picture, a lot of, people finding decent jobs that they can raise their family on and have, maybe have a vacation once in a while. I work more than one job. I have a couple consulting jobs, and I have 5 grandchildren. I have 2 adult children. My son is a captain in St. Louis Fire Department. My daughter lives in D.C. And I spend a lot of time with family, which I didn't get to do a long time ago. So I know how important it is for people, and that's what comes to my mind.
Mm-hmm. Patty Berger is the president of the St. Louis chapter of All of Us or None, and Mallory Rusch is the executive director of Empower Missouri. Mallory and Patty, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
This episode was produced by Danny Wissentowski.
Audio engineering and podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.